Well, howdy there, Internet people. It's Bo again. Two things kept running across my news feed yesterday, and I can't help but think that they're related. The first was teachers asking people to help them clear the lists. Teachers appealing to the public for the supplies they need to do their job. That's sad. That is sad. No teacher should have to do that. The other was the President of the United States wanting to nuke a hurricane. Wow. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second. That won't work. just go ahead and clear that up now. That will not work. The heat energy released by a hurricane is a whole lot more than a nuke. A whole lot more than several nukes per minute. If you nuke a hurricane, you get a radioactive hurricane. Anyway, I think those two things are related. And I know what you're saying. Trump didn't attend a woefully underfunded school. He's just like that. No, Trump isn't a product of those woefully underfunded schools. He and those like him are the cause of it. They are the cause of it. Why? Because we love the uneducated. Remember him saying that? I love the uneducated. America as a whole loves the uneducated. The establishment does. Because the establishment has no use for educated people. Might decide that you can run your own life. You don't need them. You might interfere with their profit margins. So, policymakers demand that schools create worker bees, not thinkers. Teach them just enough so they can get a job. Hearing that a lot now, right? The marketability of the skills, job skills. And the educator in the classroom, well, they can't really do much beyond that. They can't fight all of society, and all of society is now geared against them. It took us 250 years, less than, to go from Thomas Jefferson saying, educate and inform the whole mass of the people, they are our only sure reliance for the preservation of our liberty. To parents asking teachers, well, why does my kid need to know this? And silently wondering why they are losing their freedom. But money isn't really the answer. Not on its own. Don't get me wrong. No teacher should ever have to appeal to the public and rely on the generosity of the public to get the tools they need to do their job, when those tools should already be provided by the system that we're currently in. That shouldn't happen. But money alone isn't the answer. Teachers need more resources, yes, but throwing money at it isn't a magic bullet. Like most forms of magic, it doesn't exist, although that's what we always look for when we have a problem in the United States. We look for that one thing that'll solve it. It's not how it works. It's not how it works. And I know right now somebody's going, but Bo, studies show that schools with more money produce better outcomes. Yeah, that's true. That is true. But what if that is a side effect of the cure, rather than the cure itself? During World War II, there was a guy named Abraham Wald. He was a mathematician. The Air Force had gone through and drawn up diagrams showing where their bombers were getting shot up, where all the bullet holes were. He got his hands on them. Got his hands on those diagrams. Some of the planes, well, they were just riddled with bullets in certain areas. And it looked like it was pretty much the same areas in all of the diagrams. And on some of them, they weren't shot up in some areas at all. No bullets ever hit in these areas. The Air Force wanted to armor those that were riddled with bullets. Armor those areas that were riddled with bullets. Makes sense, right? Well, Abraham had a different idea. He's like, guys, you're wrong. You need to armor the areas that were never shot. What? He was right. Took him a minute, and he explained, guys, you're looking at the planes that made it back. So rather than showing the frequency of where bullets hit, it showed where planes could take bullets and still return. Those planes and those diagrams that showed all those empty spaces that never got shot up, it's because those planes crashed after getting shot. They armored the areas that didn't get shot up in the diagrams. It saved thousands of lives. We do the same thing when we're talking about public education. Yeah, more money increases outcomes of those who graduate. We're looking at the planes that made it back, not those that crashed. If you look at those that crashed, you have four main reasons. There's others, but there are four main ones. I was failing too many classes. That's number one. So education was not important. Didn't put forth the effort, couldn't put forth the effort because you didn't have the support structure at home, whatever. Education was not really that important. I was bored. Education is not its own reward. Education is not important. Number three, I became a caregiver, had a baby. Number four, school wasn't relevant to my life. Education is not important. When you look at those and understand the three that deal with the view of education, that's more than 70% gave those reasons. It's crazy. It is crazy. Because what it shows is that it's the attitude towards education. Because education is no longer its own reward. We focus on graduation, getting that piece of paper. The reality is the benefit of education occurs every day. And with our society the way it is, being instant gratification, you're asking kids to plan for a goal 12 years from now? Wonder why it's not working. Can't really imagine why. We need to stop focusing on the paper and start focusing on the education itself. The education itself is what is important, because we as a society have just talked about that paper. Bill Gates said that research shows that there is only half as much variation in student achievement between schools as there is among classrooms in the same school. If you want your child to get the best education possible, it is actually more important to get him assigned to a great teacher than a great school. And that makes sense. That makes sense because that teacher, well, they can instill a belief in the value of education as a whole rather than pursuing that diploma. That teacher can combat society and the views that we instill in the children. I think that's a little much to be asking of our teachers. I don't think they should have to fight society, a society that is geared against them, to do their job. That's a tall order. So when you look at those studies that say, well, more money spent produces better outcomes, it's because the people in those communities have shown that they value education. They're willing to pay for it. They're willing to spend more. That idea, that belief, was probably passed down to their kids. So they value education as a whole. It's not money. The reasons for people dropping out have nothing to do with money. And that is focusing on the extreme. That is focusing on those that drop out and we do need a wider approach. Education is a community asset. A successful society would want everyone educated to the highest extent possible. But instead we talk about job skills. Yeah. And right now, we're looking at this as this is the whole problem. Yes, we need to change our attitude towards education as a whole, and we need to do it quick. In the meantime, oh yeah, clear the lists. Clear the list. Give these teachers tools they need to do their job. But at the same time, advocate to teach the arts, to teach music, to teach humanities, to teach all the things that won't get them a job. All those skills that aren't marketable. Because that's what makes things interesting. That's what gives value to education. We have got to change our entire attitude towards education as a whole. Anyway, it's just a thought. Now, this is normally where the show ends, but this is kind of the pilot episode for our podcast. Thank the people over on Patreon. I said when we got to 1,000 subscribers, we would start doing it. We're like 800 and something, high 800s. So I figured I better get my ducks in a row. So you're about to get to see what it's going to look like. I would like your input. And if you like what you see, head over to Patreon. So, this week in history. August 26, 1429, Joan of Arc made her triumphant entry into Paris. On the same date, in 1789, in Versailles, France, the Declaration on Human Rights was approved. August 31st, 1919, Workers of the World Unite. The Communist Labor Party was founded in Chicago. August 26, 1920, the 19th Amendment to the Constitution is ratified. Women have the right to vote. August 27, 1928, 15 nations sign on to the Kellogg-Briand Pact. Later on, another 47 nations would join. It outlawed war, said we would seek negotiations and arbitration to solve our problems. Sadly, it just caused countries to stop declaring war and continuing to fight anyway. August 29th, 1957, the U.S. Congress passes the Civil Rights Act after the longest filibuster in Senate history, put on by Strom Thurmond. August 31st, 1961, citizens of Berlin woke up to see the barbed wire fence changed to a concrete wall, which would later be known as the Berlin Wall. August 28, 1963, one of the biggest demonstrations in U.S. history happened. It was called the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, and it ended with a charismatic Southern preacher telling us that he had a dream. August 30th, 1963, a hotline was established between Moscow and Washington, D.C. to deal with nuclear crisis. August 30th, 1967, Thurgood Marshall was confirmed as the first black Supreme Court justice. August 26, 1970, there was a nationwide strike for women's equality on the 50th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment. August 31st, 1994, the Irish Republican Army, the IRA, announced a complete cessation of military operations and paved the way to peace for the first time in 25 years. And now it is time for today's afterthought. Education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. Malcolm X. No education is wasted. None. It's all important. It doesn't matter what it is applicable to other things in your life. That is something that we need to start instilling in society as a whole. In society as a whole. But see, there are things that are playing against us. There are images and stereotypes that discourage young people. from taking an active interest in their education. The stereotypes are different, and the ideas, the things that push back against it, are different among men and women. Men seem to be the biggest culprits of failing to want to educate themselves, so we're going to talk about them first, and in probably a little bit of a greater detail. The idea that holds most men back in school from educating themselves, well, they don't want to be a nerd. They don't want to be weak. They don't want to get picked on. Tough guys aren't brainiacs. They're not smart. When's the last time you heard of a real tough guy with a master's? General Chaos. Mad Dog Mattis himself. If there is somebody in popular culture today that is the tough guy icon, it's probably Mattis, right? His other nickname is the Warrior Monk. And I know people who have worked for him. The memes are all true. He is that tough, he is that abrasive, and he will knife hand you to death. His bachelor's is in history, his master's is in international relations with a focus on security. No, tough guys, the real tough guys, those that are held up as the icons. Yeah, they are educated. Some of them formally educated. There's another guy. His name's Richard Marcinko. Demo Dick, Shark Man of the Delta. This is the guy who founded and built SEAL Team 6. When you think of SEALs today, the modern image of a SEAL, it's coming from SEAL Team 6. And he built it. His bachelor's is in international relations. His master's is in political science. Got another one for you. And this guy's a little different. He didn't go on and get higher education. He went to the University of Georgia, I think, if I'm wrong about that. Sorry. But he didn't go on to get advanced degrees or anything like that because he joined the Army and he was part of Operation Hotfoot in Laos. Just a lowly field officer. After that, he did a tour with the SAS, Special Air Service in the United Kingdom. He went over there and he learned from them. And he went to Malaysia, I believe, and helped them in their counterinsurgency operations. There he contracted a disease and was triaged as beyond help. In other words, don't waste your resources on this guy. He's going to die. He survived. He survived. But that time with SAS appears to have been transformative. He came back to 7th Special Forces, and he was just appalled that unconventional warriors didn't know anything about conventional tactics, that their training was wrong, their education was wrong. We need to fix everything. And he did. He came up with a new training program. That training program today is known as the Q course. And if you want to get a Green Beret today, you have to go through it. Education became really important. After completely transforming U.S. Army Special Forces, he headed back to Southeast Asia, went to Vietnam, took a .50 caliber round to the abdomen, was triaged as beyond help. Don't waste your resources, he's gonna die. And he survived again. That would normally be enough to put somebody out of the military and say, I'm done with this. Nope, he decided that there were other units that needed his help. So he revamped Ranger School next. The Florida phase of Ranger School was based on stuff from World War II. It wasn't useful. We needed better education. We needed to apply things that we had learned since then, because education never ends. So he did that. And then he went on to develop something else. he founded something that in official terminology was, it became 1st Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. To most of you, Delta Force. Guy founded a unit that has become the pinnacle of the U.S. Army. Guy was so tough that in the 80s, when they made a movie about him, they needed somebody to embody him. Chuck Norris. I mean, come on. And at the end of the day, what is he really known for, other than founding Delta Force? Putting a value on education within the special operations community of the United States. That's really his crowning achievement. Because even if he had only done that, Delta would have come into existence. That education is what makes those tough guys tough guys. The idea of the weak nerd needs to die. It's stupid. If you fancy yourself as a tough guy, you need to understand that if you ever want to compete among the real tough guys, you better get an education. You better get an education. Being smart does not make you weak. Does not. Now, with women, it's a different story, because society tends to elevate the superficial over substance, beauty over brains type of thing. Women, I've seen it time and time again, and it is very annoying. Women have become conditioned to play dumb because they don't want to intimidate men. Don't do that. Never do that. Never do that. Especially if you're talking about somebody who you're interested in dating. Because you can't hide your intelligence forever. It's just going to cause problems down the road. More importantly, do you want somebody who can't challenge you? Of course not. Of course not. And the best men I know, they all married smart women. But to be honest, that's not a good reason to do it, because education enriches your life. Your life. Your motivation should be what's good for you, not how to land a man. You're a prize. If you want to go with that mindset of your purpose is to find a man, you're a prize. If you can't keep up, find someone better. Do not let society's glorification of the Paris Hiltons and Kim Kardashians of the world convince you that you don't need an education. You do. And it's not just a matter of need. It's good. It's good for you. It's good for everybody. No education is wasted. Never stop learning. Always stay curious. Anyway, it's just a thought. And welcome to our do-gooder showcase. Since we're talking about education, we're going to talk about one of my favorite educational causes. It's called Pencils of Promise. And they build schools. They've built 500 or so of them in countries like Honduras, Ghana, places like that. Hundreds of thousands of students have gone through there. And it provides a benefit. It helps, the education helps lift these communities and helps create self-sustaining communities. Makes them harder to exploit. In that vein, over on our Teespring shop, there's a new t-shirt. Hurricane Nuke Team. 50% of the proceeds go to Pencils of Promise. So now it's time for Q&As. You said you have an ideological problem with Yang's UBI. What is it? I look at things through a longer scope. I don't believe in the benevolence of government, and I think that the UBI as an idea sounds great until you realize it is going to help create worker bees. I don't think that the government is necessarily there to help you. The United States government is extremely corrupt. And I don't know that relying on an institution that corrupt is a great thing. Cost of living will go up, and that UBI will stay the same. Are you a Democrat, Republican, Green, or Libertarian? No. I just graduated high school. I've watched you since you started. You're a father figure, not in a creepy daddy issues way. Give me some life-changing advice. What you believe doesn't matter. What you believe doesn't matter. What you do matters. Conviction is worthless unless it is converted into conduct. Go change the world. How can you support wounded warriors? You're anti-imperialist. For the same reason, I have a tendency to hire ex-cons. I don't believe that decisions made when somebody is 18 or 19 should preclude them from help, especially if they're hurt. So we're going to close out tonight with a story. Some of you have heard this story before. It's a story I heard when I was a kid. It has stayed with me, and it seems very relevant to the theme of education. There's a guy, and he just loved astronauts, anything to do with space. Loved it. And he gets on a plane. And sure enough, an astronaut, I can't remember which one it was, but one of the famous ones, ends up sitting right next to him. So he keeps trying to strike up a conversation with him. And he keeps kind of making a fool of himself, you know. And eventually, to get away from this guy, more than likely, the astronaut pulls out a book and starts reading. And the book is on Portuguese art. And the guy asks him, "You're an astronaut. Why are you reading a book on Portuguese art?" And the astronaut responded by saying, "Because I don't know anything about it." That is a reason to read a book. That is a reason. No education is wasted. Anyway, y'all have a good week.